Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include Diablo 2 Resurrected beta possibly coming sooner than expected, David Kim leaving Blizzard, Vicarious Visions seemingly transitioning to work on Diablo 4, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the video description below, but right before you skip ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes and stay up to date with gaming news highlights. Now before we move on, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Darkfire Heroes, which you can download from the link in the description. Darkfire Heroes is a free-to-play mobile RPG in which you collect, upgrade, and play as a variety of common, rare, and epic heroes. You select a team of heroes and then play through different campaign and dungeon levels, as well as PvP, all in real-time combat while strategically using your hero's powers and casting your own repertoire of spells. And then, of course, you claim your rewards afterwards and start outfitting your heroes with the items you find. Darkfire Heroes just launched this month. If you join now using the link in the description, you'll receive a special limited edition daily bonus on your first 7 days. There's different real-time PvP modes, including Castle Conquest, where you have to destroy your opponent's castle before they destroy yours, and my personal favorite, Hero Race, where you race through a stream of enemies to see if you can reach the end of the level before your opponent does. You'll want to swap out different team compositions and different strategies for different situations to tackle different bosses, picking from different roles like damage dealer, tank, or support. Again, you can follow the link in the description to download and check out the game for free. In our first story, a new trailer has released for Mass Effect Legendary Edition that gives us comparisons between the original and remastered graphics. The trailer shows off the enhanced and remade textures, the more detailed 3D models, and the huge improvements to the lighting. Lots of Unreal Engine 3 games at the time had these overly dark, harsh shadows on everything, when realistically, diffuse lighting within a room or outside just wouldn't look like that in real life. You just don't get those harsh, dark shadows. So it seems they've learned how to better light the environments and their characters. However, some players do seem to feel nostalgic for that old lighting, saying that it contributed to the game's atmosphere, almost giving a bit of a noir vibe. So I turn the question to you folks, what do you think? Apart from the upscale textures and the poly counts, of course, as for the lighting specifically, do you prefer the old lighting or the new lighting? As a reminder, Mass Effect Legendary Edition releases on May 14th on pretty much all platforms you would expect. In other news, David Kim has left Blizzard Entertainment, much to my chagrin, because as was evident when I spoke with him at BlizzCon while he was Diablo 4's lead systems designer, I thought he did great work. On Facebook, David Kim posted an image of himself in front of Blizzard's headquarters with the message, "Last pictures at Blizzard. Goodbye, and I will miss my friends and great people the most." When this was picked up by the StarCraft subreddit, David Kim posted a farewell and thank you message to the StarCraft community that included the tiniest of hints of what his future may contain. Quote, "I've learned a massive amount of the value of being completely transparent on the game design side in order to get help from players who have put in so much effort analyzing the reasoning behind every design decision. Definitely a lesson that I've learned so strongly and am hoping to apply it in anything else I work on in the future." Again, it's just the tiniest of hints, but this at least suggests he wishes to remain in game design. David Kim got into the video game industry after graduating in 2006, where he got a job at Relic Entertainment, working on game balance for Dawn of War and Company of Heroes. He stayed there for a year and a half before joining Blizzard in late 2007 as a game designer on StarCraft II. Then in 2010, he was promoted to senior game designer for StarCraft II's first expansion, Heart of the Swarm, where he formed and led the game's balance team. In 2013, he moved over to Heroes of the Storm for a time before returning to StarCraft as lead multiplayer designer for the game's final expansion, Legacy of the Void. Then in January 2017, he joined the Diablo team as the lead systems designer on Diablo 4. And this was the biggest departure to the kind of game that had been in his wheelhouse, real-time strategy games. Even Heroes of the Storm was created originally as a StarCraft mod, so it wasn't a huge departure from RTS. And it should be specified, David Kim was also one of the world's top StarCraft II players. And that's a real rarity for a game designer to to also be a top player. Then in September 2020, David Kim became principal game designer on World of Warcraft. And we speculated at the time that he was brought in as a ringer to help release WoW's latest expansion, Shadowlands, and wondered whether he would return to the Diablo team thereafter, or what otherwise awaited him. And now I wonder if he's heading over to Frost Giant Studios, which is an RTS-focused startup formed from former StarCraft 2 developers. So maybe he wants to get back to his RTS roots, maybe he wants to rejoin some of his former associates, or is he maybe going over to Dreamhaven, the enterprise started up by former Blizzard CEO Mike Morhaime? Or is he moving on to something else altogether? We'll have to wait and see. And speaking of RTS games, a new trailer has released for Age of Empires 4. Watching the trailer actually hit me with some nostalgic feels. I played a little bit of Age of Empires back in the day, not as much as I played StarCraft, but enough that when I got hit with those familiar sound effects, it just triggered some old memories that made me feel all warm and fuzzy. My most distinct Age of Empires memories as a kid were using the cheat codes to spawn in the sports car bazooka guys and the laser gun guys. Age of Empires 4 will launch with 8 civilizations, and it does include some innovative mechanics like stealth. We see in the trailer archers hiding in trees in order to ambush a passing army. Now, I will say that while the game looks good, the graphics don't feel next gen. They don't even really feel current gen. It feels like they're 1 or 2 generations behind what you would expect from a to release. Age of Empires 4 launches autumn 2021. On to some Path of Exile news. The new expansion has launched, along with it the new League Ultimatum. Earlier in the week, the devs released a balance manifesto, as well as the patch notes for this expansion, and one of the titles in the post sums things up nicely. General balance changes, brackets, it's all nerfs. So yes, the patch includes tons of reasonable nerfs that should shake up the meta for this league. Links in the video description as always, and for those looking to play this league, a reminder to get an updated loot filter. I recommend going to filterblade.xyz to do so. That's a website URL, by the way. And if you need help picking a build to play, Mr. Melt Jr. put together this handy flowchart. Again, a link to that below. And Ryan T12 compiled a list of starter builds made by streamers. On to some very quick Wolcen news. The devs posted an update stating, quote, "We are currently working on a content patch that will be the second part of Bloodstorm. This content patch will add more of the features announced, as well as some others that we will add based on your feedback. We're also working on developing other top suggested quality of life improvements." On to some last Epoch news. The devs have given us a glimpse at some of the attacks of the Shade of Orobis, who's an end game mode boss who will have tons of replayability, it seems, by ensuring that no 2 encounters with him will ever be the same. Or often not be the same. You see, the Shade of Orobis will have 30 different abilities, but not in any given fight. Each time you encounter him, he'll have access to a number of those 30 different abilities, and it's going to be randomized every time. So whenever you fight him, there's some new experience happening. If you and your friend both fight him in separate instances, you're going to have different attacks. It's a really interesting way of adding versatility and replay value, keeping things interesting. You're still rewarding players by allowing them to learn all 30 different attacks, but once you go into the fight, you have to start to recognize, okay, which of the attacks is he going to use this time? The devs showcased 5 of these attacks, and they all look distinct from each other and are very well telegraphed, meaning you have time to recognize and react to the attack as opposed to just die without a chance to do anything about it. On to some Diablo news. YouTuber Raven the Player tested D2R, Diablo 2 Resurrected, on ultra-wide resolution to see how the game behaves. And he shared his results with us. You see, for the years that we've been discussing a possible remaster of Diablo 2, one topic that came up as potentially problematic was monster AI and widescreen resolutions. The game was designed in a 4:3, or relatively square, aspect ratio, and the monster AI would activate just outside the edges of your screen. That is to say, monster AI isn't always active. They're just sitting there doing nothing until you get close enough to them to activate their AI. and close enough back then was just outside of that 4x3 box. When we started to see widescreen resolution mods for Diablo 2, we would see monsters hanging out on the edge of the screen, and since their AI hadn't activated yet, since the original Diablo 2 devs didn't anticipate widescreen resolutions, you just see them standing there doing nothing, as opposed to running at you. This means that you could attack monsters while they're just hanging out. So when Diablo 2 Resurrected was announced, we wondered whether this would be addressed. And now we also further wonder whether ultra-wide resolutions will change anything. Or more specifically, whether you get any advantage from ultra-wide resolutions. I encourage you to check out Raven the Player's video yourself, but from his testing, it seems that for PvP, ultra-wide players will have a distinct advantage, because you can shoot at other players before they can even see you. Since while some attacks have a fixed range, others can fly further than the edge of a widescreen monitor, meaning that you can not only see, but you can target and hit another player if you have ultra wide and he has just wide. Teleport distance is also affected by your monitor size. Wherever you can click on your screen, you can teleport. So if you have an ultra wide monitor, you can click further away and thus, with just one use of teleport, travel a further distance. Now, as for PvE and monster AI, for normal widescreen, it seems the devs managed to correct things. Monster AI does seem to activate properly, as you would expect. But for ultra-wide, monsters at the edge of your screen remain unactivated. So you can see them and shoot at them before they even know you're there. Now, once you've hit them, once they take damage rather, their AI activates, but it doesn't recognize you yet. It just has an activation whereby it begins to move around defensively to avoid taking further hits, but they still don't recognize your presence until they happen to randomly wander into their aggro range of you. So in summary, things seem to work well on normal widescreen, but ultra-wide screen players will have an advantage in PvE and a huge advantage in PvP. Whether the devs will do anything to address this is to be determined. In other Diablo 2 news, Redditor Wounded Bear noticed that a new version of the game was added internally to Battle.net, with a version number significantly ahead of the alpha version. This new version is 0.2.6, etc., whereas alpha was 0.1.6, etc. So a jump from 0.1 to 0.2 is a pretty significant jump in version and is potentially indicative of a move from alpha to beta. And further evidence that we're moving closer to beta is that if you go to Diablo2.com, the button whereby you used to opt into alpha no longer says alpha, it now says beta. Now, Blizzard had previously announced that we would get a single-player technical alpha for D2R, followed by a multiplayer alpha. But evidence is now suggesting that we're going straight from tech alpha to a beta, which means they're confident enough in moving things forward, and alpha testing must have gone very well. That's definitely good news for people who were hoping for an earlier release date than their deadline that they gave us of end of year. Now, I'll also mention for D2R that when the game launches, you'll be able to find all the guides you'll need on maxroll.gg, which has unveiled its lineup of Diablo 2 experts that'll be compiling a bunch of guides to playing your best in D2R. In other news, there's been a lot of speculation as to what Vicarious Visions, the sub-studio that made Diablo 2 Resurrected, will be doing next. We know they are now dedicated to working on Blizzard games, so will they move on to remastering another Blizzard game? Well, there's not much left to remaster, according to Blizzard's Alan Adham. Now, some people say, well, the original Diablo can be remastered, but after Blizzard released Diablo 1 on GOG, but not Diablo 2 on GOG, it seemed clear that Blizzard has no intention of remastering Diablo 1. Combine that with any potential licensing issues with the Hellfire expansion, which was published by Sierra and not by Blizzard, and I just don't see a Diablo 1 remaster ever happening. Well, a new job posting suggests that Vicarious Visions will now be helping with Diablo 4. The job posting is looking for a temp writer, specifically for Vicarious Visions and specifically for Diablo 4. Given the excellent job they've been doing with D2R, this is great news for Diablo 4. And Vicarious Visions previously served as a support team to help Bungie with Destiny 2. And some Destiny 2 players say that Vicarious Visions was responsible for some of the best content in the game. Destiny 2, being a looter shooter, shares a lot of similarities with Diablo 4 in certain ways, so hopefully their experience working on a pipeline of content updates for a looter shooter will be able to transfer over to an ARPG. Now, while great news for Diablo 4, this does make it even less likely that D2R will get more content after release. A lot of diehard D2 players want and hope for D2R to be more than a remaster, to include more changes, more content, to have new rollouts of content over time, but if Vicarious Visions is already transitioning to help with D4, this is even less likely. And that's gonna wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video in which we discussed the new Path of Exile League. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind the scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.